So if you've watched any of the other videos on my channel, you'll probably know that I love a good tube amp cranked up through a cab. But more often than not, if I'm playing at home, I'm typically playing guitar with headphones directly into my recording interface. Not only is it handy if you get inspired and want to record an idea immediately, it's super fun to be able to build a guitar sound that's just a little bit larger than life, but we'll get into that more later on in the video. So while recording big, loud tube amps like the ones behind me here, mic'd up through a cab, is pretty awesome, tube amps can get really pricey and can sometimes be impractical from a volume sense depending on your surroundings. So that's exactly where this pedal comes into play. This is the Revival Drive Compact Hot Rod from Origin Effects. It's a killer sounding, all analog, amp style distortion pedal that recreates the entire signal path of a tube amp, including the push-pull output section. To me, this is that extra kind of special sauce that allows this pedal to really feel and sound like a cranked up tube amp. And this pedal in particular is going for that boosted plexi kind of thing, but it stays really tight even at higher gain settings. It's really usable across the full sweep of the gain knob, which is kind of rare in distortion pedals, I feel like. I made another video a little while back about the non-hot rodded version of the Revival Drive, and it's definitely one of the best amp style distortion pedals that I've used in a very long time, so I was stoked to check out the hot rodded version. So this pedal has a post-drive EQ control section, which allows you to kind of shape and tailor the voice of the pedal to work into a bunch of different style guitar rigs, like a more traditional one straight into a Fender or a Marshall style amp. But when you switch it into the power amp setting, the pedal is voiced to go directly into a clean power amp, or in this case, directly into a recording interface. This is an awesome way to record silently and get all of the sound and feel of a boutique tube amp, but in a really convenient pedal format. As much as amp sim plugins are getting pretty amazing these days, and I use them all the time, to me, playing through the Revival Drive is much closer to the sound and feel of playing through the actual amps that I have. All right, so here we are inside Logic Pro 10. This has been my DAW of choice for many, many years now, and I have the Revival Drive running directly into my recording interface, which in this instance is a Universal Audio Apollo. And when you plug a pedal like this direct into an interface, the sound that you're gonna get out of it is pretty gnarly and brash and brittle, and it sounds like this. So kind of an unusable tone there on its own, but the reason for that is that this is basically like taking the speaker output of your amp and putting it in a load box or something, and there's no cabinet going on in that instance. So what you need to do in that situation is run a thing called an impulse response, which is basically like a snapshot of a speaker cabinet. And there are tons of different options out there from a lot of different manufacturers, but in this instance, just for the visual representation, and they sound great, I'm using the Neural DSP Archetype Nolly, and this is a full-on amp sim plugin with effects and multiple amps to choose from, but I have all of the effects and the amp and the EQ and all that stuff bypassed, and all that I'm using is this cabinet section here. And it has a really cool visual representation of what you've got going on. You can click and drag the mics just like you would place a mic on a cabinet in real life. So I've got two mics here on this cabinet, an SM57 and a Beyerdynamic M160, and it's pretty close sounding to the cab that I use. So one more time, here's the sound of the Revival Drive just on its own. And now I'll kick on the cab. This is just the SM57. And now adding in the M160. It just kind of adds a little bit more bottom and fills out the sound a bit. So right there, that's a pretty killer guitar tone just straight out of the pedal into a cab sim, and you're kind of off and running and ready to start recording with that alone. But this is kind of where the fun part starts for me, getting into EQing and reverb and delays and all that kind of stuff, and really get the studio effects thing happening. So the first thing that I'm hearing is I would love a little bit more brightness out of this, and I can do that directly on the pedal, or I can get into some post EQs and channel strips and stuff like that. So I'm gonna try and add a little top end on the pedal first. This is boosting the high control. There's also a presence control, which really tightens up the pedal a bit and adds a lot of top-end boost. This is with the gain straight up at noon. So I really like adjusting the brightness of the pedal, or the amp in this case, with an analog thing right there next to me. But I'm a big fan of post EQ, which is EQing your guitar sound after it's been picked up by a microphone. But in this case, we've got an IR acting as microphones on a cabinet. So what I'm gonna do is pull up a channel strip here from Universal Audio. This is the API Vision channel strip, one of my favorite channel strips. So that's our bass sound, but if I activate the channel strip, I'm adding a bit of top end and high mid-range at around 8K, 4K, 2K, just a hair of each of those. So here it is without it. And this is one of those things that if you were mixing a song and trying to sit your guitars nicely in a mix, you would, of course, adjust this stuff, but for the sake of just jamming on your own, you know, season to taste and whatever you're feeling in the moment. So I really like that added brightness that's going on there. And also I generally like to roll off a bit of low end and top end. So with this high pass and low pass filter, here it is without it. I'll disengage the EQ again. So this is just the filters, high pass, low pass. Just shaving off the top and bottom there, and now kicking on the EQ again. So it just tightens up the bottom end a bit and removes a bit of that brash top end that you're gonna get with distorted guitars. So next up, I'm thinking I want to add a bit of space and dimension to this sound, and I'm going to do that with a room reverb. So far, everything has been monophonic, but this is where things start to get really fun and you can get really creative, and the sky's kind of the limit with the amount of effects and processing and all that stuff that you can do. So here I'm bringing in a room reverb from Valhalla, and now our mono guitar sound is going to be processed in stereo. That's really over the top, but I'm just boosting it to show you what's going on here. So here it is, fully maxed out. But just that little bit of space really makes things feel like you're in a real room, and it makes the guitar a lot more lively and fun to play, in my opinion. So next up, I want to add a bit of stereo delay. And again, this is all stuff that if you were trying to build it with actual analog gear in the real world, it is going to quickly become very expensive with multiple amps and multiple cabs and a ton of cabling and stereo effects and all that stuff. So the fact that you can build this stuff so easily in the box is really awesome, and it's super fun to play with, and you could really get creative with things. So what I'm going to do is bring in the repeater vintage mod delay for a bit of stereo ping pong sound. So that's another thing about the Revival Drive that's pretty awesome, is the way that it cleans up when you roll back your guitar's volume. I know a lot of plugins can do that as well, but I really don't think they do it as well as the all-analog Revival Drive does. Next up is a really fun one, the MicroShift from Soundtoys, and this is an emulation of an Eventide H3000, which gives you that full-on wide 80s stereo spread kind of thing, and I use it all the time just to kind of fill out the sound in headphones. So here's our regular guitar sound again. Kick it on MicroShift. So that's a super fun one, and you can definitely overdo it, but if you're just playing in headphones and jamming and trying to get inspired, I use this one all the time. So I'm gonna boost the gain on the Revival Drive while we've got this super wide guitar sound going on. That's gain all the way up, but it still stays really tight in the bottom end. That's the gain at about 2 o'clock. So the hot-rodded version of the Revival Drive has a really usable and wide range of gain that goes all the way from pretty rippin' high gain tones like you heard in the intro of the video, but if you dial back the gain on your pedal or your guitar, things really clean up into this nice, lush, mid-gain edge of breakup kind of thing. It's like an AC/DC-ish level of gain. And if you roll back your guitar's volume from there, it cleans up even more. So there are a ton of different effects out there, everything from compressors and EQs, modulation, reverbs, delays, you name it. But it's a big reason of why I choose to jam and write and record in this format a lot of the time, is because it's just really fun and inspiring to build guitar sounds in this way. And once you get into the world of recording with IRs, you can really dramatically change the sound of your guitar after it's already been recorded. It just comes in really handy if you're trying to fit guitars into a mix. So I fully understand that getting into the world of going direct and recording interfaces and impulse responses and digital audio workstations can be pretty overwhelming and intimidating, but if you take it bit by bit, it's a really cool way to get into recording and getting great sounding guitar tones in a relatively affordable way. I have the luxury of being able to crank a tube amp and mic it up through a cabinet with where I'm at, but for so many people that's just really impractical and not really a possibility. And playing direct through this Revival Drive with an impulse response is honestly one of the closest things to playing through my actual amps that I've ever tried, and I think that that's really down to the analog signal path of this pedal and just the way that it's designed overall. So you can full on replace an amp with this pedal, obviously directly into a recording interface, or if you're using it on a pedal board with a cab sim and going direct to front of house, or with a small power amp into a cabinet, or like a traditional way straight into a guitar amp. It sounds amazing in all of those different contexts, and it's pretty incredible what the folks at Origin are doing in such a small package. And I know I said this in the last Origin Effects video, I get that these pedals are on the pricier side of pedals in general, but they're built incredibly well, they sound amazing, and they're just so versatile. There's so many different ways that you can use these pedals and so many different styles of guitar rigs that I definitely think it's a case of you get what you pay for. So hit the link in the video description below to check one out for yourself, and I really appreciate you checking out the video. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.